And we're live once again. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove. How are you, man?
Hey, happy New Year again. Um, Doing okay. We had a little bit of a wild week here in the United States, but I don't know. Think we're all still standing. So probably enough said about that.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
we got enough wackiness to talk about already today.
Oh, yeah, dude. This is a wacky case. I mean, this is not gonna be like a case that we do on our regular basis. It's not really a mystery. Well, I guess the motive is the mystery here. So we're
Yeah,
gonna be
human
talking.
mind. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're gonna be talking about the Nashville bombing this week, and without any further ado, I think you wanna say the beginning words regarding this case, and then we could jump to the details.
Yeah. So, Christmas morning, 2020. Um, Probably already a hard and a pretty weird year for everybody. You see like one of the first things I see in the news is there's been like this big bombing and a whole bunch of damage, but then it didn't really look like anybody died, though there were some injuries, and that was interesting. I think I had a bit of a relief. So then I think as we're going to find out as all these details come out, you have kind of a weird situation because what if you how do you think about something that's like, I guess we're on the fence whether it's a terrorist act, or whether, to be a terrorist act, something requires, politics to be involved or greater political concepts. But I guess either way, when somebody does something, kind of tremendously awful, how do you view it if it looks like the person had like some amount of conscience when they did it? Like if the person had some apparent, I mean, it's hard to say that someone did something really awful, but with like good intentions, even though, obviously a lot of people drink their own Kool-Aid about why they're doing something. But if someone does something that looks like they took some pains to minimize the actual physical harm to other human beings, how do you think about that? I guess that's one of the things we're going to think about today is when someone does that. And then I guess the other thing to think about too is that you know, sometimes the motivating forces behind what people do is pretty weird. So, obviously none of us are strangers to the idea of people doing, kind of horrible things like suicide bombings or massacres or assaults on different kinds of targets, both military and civilian, for different reasons. And it's kind of funny because sometimes you can, obviously, if it's like your beliefs, then it doesn't seem silly. But your not silly beliefs can be very silly to someone else, right? Because we don't all believe the same things. We don't all have the same, religion. We don't all have the same ideas of government and, what human rights are. So, in that respect, when someone goes and they have what turns out to be somewhat outrageous or fringe beliefs, at some point when you know someone like that, what's like the line? What's the line where you say, well, this person's just out of their head because they believe in like, well, we're going to talk about reptilians or something like that. But then like, what's the difference between that and like, some of the bigger religious ideas or the spaghetti monster in the sky, whatever it is you believe in. It's interesting to think about. So we're kind of casually tread today in the area of privacy, personal privacy, and your right to believe things versus the safety and let's say the rights of others to not, have their safety trampled on. So that's something that we're really gonna look at too. And I think the other thing we're gonna think about is at what point does something become a warning flag where you can, get really nosy in someone's business? And we're going to talk about somebody who was living a pretty private life and was very paranoid and very protective over that life. And, on paper, didn't necessarily have much that would justify someone sniffing in on their lives. But then you look at like maybe like other people who fit a slightly different profile but had done on essentially the same things. And, like, especially 20 years ago, the FBI would have been kicking down their door and, up in their business and maybe prevented what happened from happening. So I think that's going to come up a little bit. There's going to
Mm,
be a little bit of that terror. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
someone's going to say, hey, did this guy have some kind of like quote unquote privilege because he didn't, he was one
Mm,
demographic and these other guys, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they're a different demographic or a different religion. So like at some point, did this guy get kind of a free pass when he shouldn't have? So yeah, I think that's probably a good lead in for the events
for
of
sure.
Christmas Day.
Right, for sure. So let me just get us through the events. So let's start off with the Christmas Day, December 25th, 2020. Christmas, I would say noon. Yeah, Christmas. Oh no, wait. Christmas night. Let's remember this happened at night. So this is, I believe, this is the Christmas morning, right? So I'm having the timeline. I'm looking at it. It's 1:20 a.m. in Nashville, in the downtown area of Nashville. 1:20 a.m. An RV, a recreational vehicle, those like big vehicles that really don't make any sense. I view them as, somewhat retarded concept. Now, the RV, Metro Police say, is involved in the explosion was actually spotted in the area as early as 1:20 a.m. Now, at 4:30 a.m., in Second Avenue building, an owner and resident, Betsy Williams, said she woke up after hearing the sounds of several bursts of rapid gunfire. Now, before we jump any further into this case, I was actually interested in terms of like whether or not the person who committed the bombings, whether he was actually using guns, because I don't believe in the wreckage they found any remnants of guns, but I do believe there was like a clip or something like that. I think you argued a little bit beforehand when we did our little chat before starting the recording. I think your argument was that he probably used it in one of his audio, I guess, cassettes or whatever he was using, like in the audio that he was playing. More on that a little bit later. But yeah, I think, if you don't want to add anything on that, I'll just continue on with the timeline, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll just put my 2 cents. That was my impression. It didn't sound like. I mean, it sounded. It was like somebody wanted to make it sound like
Yeah.
gunshots were going off. So that was the intent. But it doesn't look like that person, maybe from that same safety-minded orientation, quote unquote, for a huge explosion, wasn't actually setting off shots, but
Right.
was like playing lifelike sounds.
Just as I was looking into the timeline, I remember reading that there was a clip found somewhere, unused clip. So I don't think there's evidence that the man actually shot, but I think there is evidence that like at least bullets were in his possession at that point. And I mean, it's Nashville, Tennessee. I would assume you could probably own weapons there. You probably go to like a Walmart and buy something like that. You know what I mean? Now jumping 1 hour later, after a, a second round of gunfire sounds, the same person, Betsy Williams, said she called 911. I actually have the 911 call, so let's just listen in, guys, for the 911, how Betsy sounded, when she called the law enforcement.
We got like a call about shots being heard.
Yeah, shots, but now there's a sound on there that says there's a limited time to evacuate this area. There's a large bomb inside this vehicle that is playing over and over and over outside.
Gotcha.
And I was just concerned that that's the police car saying that.
Yeah, so Betsy sounds fairly in distress, actually, and she says that there's this vehicle outside of her building that she owned an apartment in, and from that strange RV vehicle, like notifications of eventual massive explosions were being portrayed to the public. She was really distressed when she called the cops. I found it really interesting how like the police lady was just kept like talking over her. I mean, it's just Interesting. Now, at this point, it's 5:38 a.m., so probably early morning hours, right? So the dispatcher says police are just a few doors down and they will arrive shortly. Now, about let's jump back to the timeline. 6:30 a.m. an explosion occurred. So this is that massive explosion. I think on the visual assets I will show the actual footage, the CCTV footage, fairly shortly. Now the explosion occurred along the 2nd Avenue North. Metro Police said it was linked to this same RV and appeared to be an intentional act. Right after the explosion, we have another 911 call. Let's listen into that one as well really quickly.
It's, oh my God, I think it's an explosion. Ralph, watch out.
All right, ma'am. We already have responders on the way. Okay, I need to go. 911 is backing up. I want you to get out of that place
911 is
immediately.
coming already.
Okay, I need to let you go.
Yeah,
get
we're
out
all
of the building
getting out.
immediately. Okay, bye.
All right, thank you.
Right, so that's another 911 call. So this is after the explosion. We have 15 minutes later, emergency crews actually shut down the streets and federal agents were called in. 3 people were hospitalized for unspecified injuries. And, the Nashville Fire Department said, they're probably going to be looking into this area for the foreseeable future. One thing to mention here as well is that the recordings, I'm sure we're gonna get into it shortly, but like the sound recordings that were coming out of that RV, they gave a pretty detailed instructions to the local populace to evacuate the area. So as you've said in the premise of this show, definitely it sounded like the person who is one second. I think I need to share the screen with you, right? I don't think you saw that. One sec. Do you see it right now, dude?
Yeah.
Great. So basically, the person, right, who made like the audio recordings, who gave like the detailed introduction what to do to the local populace who was living in downtown. He pretty much gave them instructions to evacuate, so it definitely seemed like he was not out to kill people, that's for sure. Now, I just want to quickly finish the timeline of the same day. 10:40 a.m. Police went door to door with dogs in the downtown area to search nearby buildings, though they said there was no indication of any additional devices. 10:45 a.m., the White House released a statement about the explosion. President Trump has been briefed on the explosion and will continue to receive regular updates. The president is grateful for the incredible first responders and praying for those who were injured. 11 a.m., several people were taken to the police department's central precinct for questioning, but authorities declined to give more details. Declined to give more details on the same day. Also, one interesting fact to mention here is that AT&T, I think this building and this corporation will play a part in this episode. AT&T internet and phone service was disturbed in the Nashville area, and AT&T spokesman confirmed the outage was linked to the explosion. The outage led to widespread 911 issues in Nashville area and telecommunications issues at Nashville International Airport, halting outbound flights. 2 p.m. MNPD released a surveillance photo of the RV Friday afternoon and asked for the public's help. Police said the RV in question was spotted in the area of 2nd Avenue North and Commerce Street after 1 a.m. on Friday. At 4:16 p.m., Nashville Mayor John Cooper announced he has issued a state of civil emergency at the explosion site and the surrounding area that will put in place a curfew starting at 4:30 p.m. Friday until 4:30 p.m. on Sunday. Now, the area affected are bound by James Robertson Parkway, 4th Avenue North Broadway, and the Cumberland River. So that's pretty much The timeline of events, I think, we'll jump into the perpetrator, we'll jump into everything. I just wanted to give this timeline. And dude, let's just jump into the person, responsible. I think you have some information regarding this man, right?
Yeah, so as police and investigators start sorting through the wreckage and figure out what it was that blew up and start looking at the pieces of identification for who owned the thing that blew up, they start to circle in on the name of somebody called Anthony Quinn Warner. And, I guess when you dig into him, whenever something like this happens, sometimes some things are not a big surprise. I think we'll find as you dig into him that, we've talked about profiling, psychological profiling and criminal profiling a couple times now the past few weeks. And, I think you could, as we start to outline his life, you'll start to build a profile in your mind of this individual. So he is, his name is Anthony Quinn Warner. He's a white male. What was he in his, I think his 60s?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was raised in Nashville's Antioch neighborhood, graduated from Antioch High School in the mid-1970s, so around the time I was born. He worked in a series of IT jobs, including as an independent computer technician, contracted with a real estate firm. He also, he did some other kind of, I guess, tech related or high tech jobs. Like he owned a company that was licensed to produce burglar alarms in the mid to late 90s. And on the other hand, he served 2 years probation for felony marijuana possession in 1978, but it had no other legal contact since. Now, I'll just mention, just to be, I mean, far be it for me to be fair to a suicide bomber, but the drug laws, especially at that point, because that's Nixon era United States, the drug laws got fairly strict, and depending on, in some states, even a small amount of marijuana could be a felony. So this isn't saying that he was like a dealer. He wasn't Tony Montana or something, looking to deal big amounts necessarily. That doesn't mean anything. And I think that probably his clean record since then speaks towards that. But a felony, for those of you outside the U.S., a felony is a major conviction. Felony is like usually something that carries actual restrictions of your rights, meaning you can't necessarily have a handgun, and you can't necessarily vote, at least until you can get that back off your record. Sometimes there's like ways to remediate that, but it is interesting later on that he had firearms involved. So anyway, he had kind of a relatively solitary life. I mean, if I were to profile him, he looks like somebody that maybe had probably something on the autism spectrum, and that's not to discriminate against people on the autism spectrum, because there are plenty of people on the autism spectrum. But I'm kind of guessing that, especially given his attraction to like the high tech industry stuff, his kind of loner social affect and limited social contacts, and maybe the way he was described later on in the story, I would guess maybe something like Asperger's. Okay, so anyway, there's some other stuff. Yep, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that, yeah, pretty much he seemed like a loner, right? I want to add a little bit of information. His neighbors actually said that he pretty much was a Shetland type of a person. He did own an RV, that RV vehicle, and he had lost interest in it for like many years. But then, 1 month before, this explosion, the neighbors actually stated that he regained an interest in this RV, was taking it out on a regular basis. In my opinion, it's a dead giveaway. I think we talked a little bit about just like the Ariel Castro, the black guy who was like dead giveaway. I think this is a dead giveaway, dude. You own like a shitty RV vehicle, and you obviously lose interest in it because you're probably like, he wasn't a smart person, so obviously he lost interest in that shitty RV. Now he like gains back this interest. one neighbor 4 days before, I have his quote. 4 days, right? Let's imagine this. 4 days before the explosion. Let me just find the quote. Rick Lode, Warner's neighbor since 2010. So a guy who knew Anthony Warner for like 10 years, told CNN Monday, like I actually listened to his interview a little bit beforehand, and he did state some additional information that he always Anthony really seemed like a closed off person. He wasn't like participating in the community and stuff like that. But 4 days before the explosion, he said, "Hey Anthony, is Santa going to bring you something good for Christmas?" The neighbor asked Anthony. Anthony's response: "Yes, I'm going to be more famous. I'm going to be so famous Nashville will never forget me." Now the neighbors, yeah.
That's a wrong answer. Yeah,
Dude, yeah.
yeah.
So basically, the neighbor the neighbor thought that Werner was referring to something good happening. The neighbor was like, "Oh, at least Anthony is doing something good, for Christmas this year." His quote, "Let me be very clear. He and I were not friends." So obviously now everyone's like throwing Anthony under the bus here. You will not find anyone in my neighborhood who will claim to be a friend of his. He was just a legitimate recluse. FBI agent Doug Korneski said investigators are interviewing people who knew him to try to learn a positive motive. There is no indication that anybody else was involved, he said. Quote is, "These answers won't come quickly. Though we may be able to answer some of those questions, none of these answers will ever be enough for those affected by this event." I will say that, in terms of like real estate, yeah, sure, like he blew up the real estate, but no one actually died, and at the rate that the Fed is printing money, I mean, they could just like, just buy, like, fund this whole place. Like, it's not even a problem for America at this point. So, who even, like, I don't know, like, what do you think about the dude? Like, he warned everyone to evacuate. So I'm thinking he definitely, he wasn't like caring, I would say, but he definitely didn't want people to die, I would assume, right?
Yeah, and that's the really weird thing about this, and because it does, I mean, especially given all we've been through, especially the last 20 years, right? I mean, it is nice for some crazy person to actually look out for the lives of other human beings, especially of all days on Christmas Day. Um,
Yeah.
it's also interesting that for the most part, like I said, I mean, obviously now everyone's kind of backing away and disconnecting them, disavowing any relationship with him and disconnecting themselves socially from him. But it just, I mean, the only bad thing I read was actually from his former lawyer, where his lawyer said that the guy was like super all business and not personable, and the lawyer described him as kind of a miserable human being, and apparently they'd had a little bit of disputes about how certain things were managed. So there's a specific thing that happened. This is sort of interesting as we get into this, but
Yeah.
he actually had like a legal dispute with his own mother, who's like 85.
Wow.
Which is also interesting because it looks like there was kind of I could do some psychoanalysis and say, her age is not that far off of his. So maybe you could trace back. Maybe it was like somebody having a kid too early in her life and not giving him the nurturing he needed, and then here he is now, taking her house away from her. But he basically tried to give away her house out from under her, and then he got sued. And then as he started losing the court case, he dropped his lawyer, and so that lawyer had some not nice things to say about him. But that was about it. I mean, everyone else kind of said, well, yeah, he was kind of a weird loner, like not super friendly. But I mean, the fact that guy felt comfortable, like I'm not asking anybody who lives around me what they're getting from Santa. So either that guy's got the biggest cojones in the world and just, talks like that to everybody, or he felt
Uh,
okay to like bust this guy's horns a little bit. You know what I mean?
just a little
Yeah.
step in. I did listen to the interview of the guy because I think he was like the weird dude on CNN who had
Oh.
like that blue bandana and like that cowboy hat. He was like hiding his face. It was I don't know, dude. Like that was a weird situation in the first place. But
Okay.
I think he mentioned that or at least like the sense that I've got, from listening to that interview, I think I got the sense that it was one of those awkward situations, when there's like a guy who doesn't really talk that much, and you like sort of, when you're like in close proximity of such a person who doesn't talk too much, you want to like sort of do the small talk, you know what I'm saying, but you don't really know what to say to him because it's like an awkward situation. So I think it was that type of a situation where it's like, they were like probably meeting somewhere in the neighborhood, maybe like outside, in the street or something like that, and the neighbor was like, shh, God damn, I have to like do like this small talk right now. So hey Anthony, what you getting for Christmas?
It's like,
And then Anthony's like, well, I'm gonna be famous, my guy. You know what I mean? I'm gonna just take my RV downtown, just like the
yeah,
song, dude. Just let's mention the song. The song was crazy. For everyone who doesn't really know what I'm talking about, just before we get into the further details, let's listen to Petula Clark Downtown from 1964. This joint was actually played in the RV before the explosion. So let's just listen into this joint real quick. Yeah, so this guy is a gangster, man. In my opinion, you play that shit, before the explosion in downtown. God damn, you know what I mean? I got respect for the guy, of course.
I mean, actually, instead of saving it for the end, let me just ask you:
Yeah.
when someone does something like that, I mean, I've talked about this. This is an ongoing theme with me. I keep on thinking that popular culture is almost like making, like people feel like they have to do things now. Like people feel like they have to do those selfies and do, like, do you think that someone like this, they watch too many friggin' movies from like the 90s, and since then, too many movies where it's like, oh, Dennis Hopper playing some kind of crazed, psychotic, evil genius who's gonna have every little move planned and have the ironic background music to play behind it. Like I don't know, I'm starting to
Yeah.
resent it a little bit. We're like, is this person posing when they do this? I mean, why are they doing that?
It's hard to say, dude. It's really hard to say, dude. I don't even know, man. Since I'm not really, I do like movies from the 90s, but I wouldn't say that I would be sort of, influenced by them to do these activities. So it's hard to say, dude. But I don't know what movie in particular are you thinking?
Well, I mean, there's lots of movies like Speed or anything like that
Oh, for
where
real, Speed, Speed.
or yeah, Speed, or even like I'll say even like any of the lots of series like Dexter or whatever it is, anything where it's like they're kind of making it almost attractive or like glorifying. That, like I said, it's obviously like, when one movie does it, you could say, well, that's just art, or that's telling a good story. When it becomes a pattern, and I'll give you a good, what I think is a good example, and it's going way back, Columbine. Columbine, those guys dressed like they were in an action movie, and I think that was one of the criticisms about Columbine, was that these guys had I mean, mind you, these guys are only a couple years younger than me, so like as far as like when they were born, so we basically grew up in the same era. They had this freaking diet in the 80s and 90s of like action movies and this kind of message, like if you want to solve a problem, grab a gun. That's like kind of, I mean, I've noticed this in TV shows since, especially American TV shows,
Yeah.
love to glamorize grabbing a weapon and the sunglasses and whipping the sunglasses off your face. And, The Matrix, case in point, I think was one where like it was the perfect mix of like kind of glamorizing all of that. And obviously that was supposed to be in a computer environment and not real. So maybe that's their excuse. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the Columbine tapes, I mean, look at those guys. Like they're obviously trying really hard to look cool.
Dude,
So
when you
yeah,
mentioned that, I just remembered the guys from the Columbine shooting. They did look like they were from the Matrix, They really did.
yeah.
Yeah.
Trench coats, the glasses, especially when they actually did it. They're running around the cafeteria with like their, their. I mean, some of it was actually to do the crime, but yeah, mind you, I'm going on a tangent, so I'll probably cut it off here. But the whole reason they did it, was about how they had been slighted socially, and how they felt like they had been treated badly and sort of lost face in front of their peers. So, certainly they knew they were on camera on the school surveillance system, and that they were going to try to go out with a bang. Anyways, I'll cut it off there for now. I think the interesting thing is, I don't know, when you said it, like I said, once again, maybe this is a cultural thing, because certainly in the South, just the neighbors talking to each other. The thing about LA is a little bit notorious for being like kind of insular. We don't really talk to your neighbors that much, maybe unless you live in certain neighborhoods or
Just like
a certain situation.
Just like Eastern Europe, like all of it.
Yeah. I think, well, like funny enough, New York for like, all of the reputation of people being rude to each other and very short with each other. I have heard that you pretty much do know everybody in your block. Like you will talk to people in your apartment. And yeah. So that's weird. It's kind of a weird thing. It's like the opposite of what you would think in a really cosmopolitan urban place. But that's apparently like you do actually know like everybody in the area. But yeah, I'll tell you, like I never talk to my neighbors. Like I don't think I've said 10 words to the people across the street from me, in any direction.
For real, dude.
yeah,
I have no idea what my neighbors' names are, and I've been living in the same place for like 2 decades.
You know what's funny, dude? They know me. So like I used to ride around here on a skateboard all the time in my 30s. Like I used to do longboarding with like a pole. A whole other story. But yeah, you can like basically push yourself around with like a big stick on a longboard. So like people down the street, they all know my name, and they're like, "Hey, Glenn," and I'm like, "Hey, what your name is?" Like wow. I don't know. Wow. Yeah, I mean, but I'm hard to miss too. So, oh well, that's on me. Okay, so I mean, yeah, I guess the thing is, like, this guy had kind of a weird life. He'd had kind of an on and off relationships with people, so it's kind of nice to think that even if you're socially awkward, doesn't mean you can't have a girlfriend, and as we'll find out, it doesn't mean you can't have a girlfriend who won't call the cops on you about your guns and your bomb making, which did happen. But I guess before we get into that, one of the things that came up right away, because whenever something like this happens, obviously, this guy blasting music and, oldies through his RV while he blows it up, but somehow scares everybody away so he doesn't hurt anybody.
I will say,
on Christmas Day. Yeah.
I will say that song is really nice. Like, I'm probably gonna like play that in my car when I'm like driving around. Like that's a good ass song. If not for Anthony Werner, I would not even known of Petula Car.
No, that's from, well, I mean, it's just side topic, but that's sort of during one of the best eras, kind of the golden age of American music, American pop music. So that's when there was so much money and so much quality and so many great bands and so many different kinds of music in American, pop and rock and R&B. I mean, it was like, I don't know if there ever will be a period with as much good music
for real
as then. But yeah, you would for sure love American oldies stations then, because American oldies stations, 50s and 60s music, and then 70s. Yeah, man, that's interesting, because you think about that guy, he's playing a music basically from probably his childhood, right? With that song, because he's probably under 10 when that song comes out. Okay, so when something like that happens, just like when 9/11 happened, or when Columbine happened, or whenever something happens, people ask, well, like, why did the person do it? What did they believe in? and now we're going to go through some of his beliefs. We're not saying that this is why he did it. We're going to have, I think, one that he didn't talk about as much, that we think might have been why he picked the particular target for his bomb.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but laugh because one of the main things I talked about was how he believed in what is referred to in Wikipedia as reptilian conspiracy theory. I'd never even heard about this dude until like Rogan started going into it the past few years, because Rogan used to go super fringe. Like Rogan's kind of tightened it up a little bit, where he talks to so many serious people now that he has too much important stuff to think about, so he doesn't really talk about like as much dumb stuff anymore.
Which
and this
is sad.
Yeah, I mean he definitely still goes to the edges, but it used to be like a little wackier, and I don't know. I mean, I have to say, I was telling my wife, I feel like Rogan now, just from Rogan talks to so many smart people, so many hours of the week, that he's actually turning into like a semi-wise guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's talking to someone
smart.
that actually has.
I think he's pretty smart.
He was always clever. I mean, his stand-up was always just spot on. His stand-up was great, but I think that his level of education outside of things like martial arts and professional pool and things like that, his kind of level of knowledge was a little bit lacking, and I don't think that's the case anymore. I think he's starting to even understand things like quantum physics. So yeah, it's admirable. It goes to show you put enough time in something, you can develop some expertise in almost anything. So reptilian conspiracy theory, which I learned of via Rogan and then did research later, looks like the idea is kind of always floated out there. I guess there's always been in human culture, from different cultures, there's always been, snakes have been the bad guy, or at least a player in human mythology for a long time. Case in point, Adam and Eve in the Bible, but for sure other religions that are not what they call Abrahamic religions. But in recent times, there's a famous kind of pulp author named Robert E. Howard, who invented the Conan the Barbarian stories. It was sort of this new era, 20th century, like fiction, in an era when more and more Americans were literate. There was a huge demand for fiction, and people like Robert E. Howard stepped up and provided it. And in those Conan the Barbarian stories and some of his other stories, the idea was there were like this kind of like ancient race of shape-shifting reptile humanoids who would change their appearance and infiltrate human society, humanity, to manipulate it politically for devious ends. And sometimes those were like unholy ends. Sometimes they were just about power. And it's interesting because it kind of shows you how any kind of idea like that, can eventually just become like a religion unto itself. So what's weird is you have people that probably grew up as children reading that stuff, or their parents read it, and then they read it, like their dad was like, or their older brother was like, dude, you got to read this Conan story. And then over time, you have, I'll just say one specific conspiracy theorist, this guy David Icke, who seems to have taken this reptilian thing and just ran with it and made like a whole career out of it. And at that point you're like, well, does this dude really believe in this, or is it just like convenient to his wallet to, write as much as he can and get everyone else believing in, the Great Pumpkin?
I respect that.
Yeah, I guess it makes you wonder, if you were really cynical, it makes you wonder how different that is than a lot of other cults or religions, right? Depending on how much you believe those things do or don't represent metaphysical reality. So, okay. Then the other part of it, other interesting thing was, as UFO culture, and once again, I'm coming from me, someone who wants to believe in UFOs and extraterrestrials, but someone who also fully acknowledges that there's some high level of crap that gets filtered in there, and liars and people that, kind of just want attention, and it's a lot of and even I would say intentional misdirection from different forces, because of course, if there's truth, if you can mix in some crap that people find out about with that truth and make people not feel good about the truth, then obviously like you've kind of helped undermine the truth, right? So that's, I'll throw that in there. But anyways, in UFO culture, there's been this kind of body of work around, when people claim that they've actually met alien humanoids, usually, whether they're abducted or at a landing site or something. Sometimes those aliens were quote unquote reptilians, reptile looking, and make of that what you will. But that's interestingly where he had our antagonist, he became very fascinated with some whole conspiracy theory that I was just dying to find out, like how this all, because it was like some grand conspiracy theory around how somehow reptilians and 9/11, and then I couldn't tell if this was a typo or not. Supposedly, if this isn't a typo, he believed that there was some kind of massive alien attack that began on September 2011. So not 9/11. That's where I was like, I wasn't sure if the papers and the reporters were getting this right, or moving digits around the wrong way. But his theory had something to do. He had like apparently all these documents and like thumb drives full of videos and stuff, where apparently he deeply believed, maybe, that reptilian aliens, in the conspiracy, the reptilians that run the world and the Illuminati and everything else, that there had been some kind of attack that had begun on 2011 in September, and that had been getting suppressed by the world's press, and so I'll say right there, that was one reason maybe for him to put a target on the communication infrastructure, right? And like we said,
dude, I have a question immediately. So, if this is the case, that would mean that the press organizations are all in cahoots with the reptilian aliens at this point? Or...
That's right.
Oh, shit.
Well, worse than that. So, according to the reptilian, whatever flavor of reptilianism you believe in, apparently even some of the actual quote-unquote ruling families are either actual reptilians themselves or somehow interbred with them, and or just directly working for them.
Dude.
That's like the whole Illuminati thing, right?
Dude.
That's they're saying that
I was scrolling Instagram yesterday. Instagram. By the way, everyone who wants to follow me on Instagram, Juras _Sim on Instagram. I post some pretty cool stuff there. If you're interested, in finding out more about my stuff, you could go there. I was scrolling through Instagram. I saw this post. Queen Elizabeth hasn't aged in 20 years, my guy. What the hell?
I mean, she is like a billion years. I mean, I'll fully admit, she seems to just keep going on forever. I mean, dude, she was repairing trucks during World War II. I mean, that's how old she is. She's like over 100, I think, right? I mean, she's
no, she's like 90.
Yeah, she really was. Yeah. How old is she? She's 98.
I think she's 94, I believe. I could just like quickly check.
Yeah, no, look it up, because I think she's past 100. She's
94.
94. Okay, and her husband's also pretty old, so maybe he's a reptilian too. Yeah, I mean, she literally, I mean, she. By the way, everybody who's listening, watch The Crown. Good series.
And also, since we have a 10%, or I would assume it has raised recently to 12% audience in the UK. Definitely no disrespect to the UK. I love the country. Yeah. I've lived there for 1 year. I love the country. I love everyone from the UK. I think you guys are real cool. It's just a thought.
God save the Queen. Yeah. So yeah, definitely not. Like I said, I have very, especially after watching that The Crown series, I have pretty positive feelings about specifically the Queen. So, I mean, and plus she could fix trucks. So, look at that. So for all that though, what's strange is the thing that actually might have made him, besides, the idea that maybe this communication infrastructure and the massive communications company, like we said, AT&T, which, at this point owns like what? Cable companies, and I think studios, and
CNN,
all these other CNN. Yeah, I mean, basically pieces of like the Turner empire, which eventually was part of the Warner Brothers empire. Full disclosure, former employer of mine, Warner Brothers. Not reptilians, as far as I know. For all of that, the idea is, because this was a real hot button kind of conspiracy theory last year, was the idea that 5G was his real target. So, short version, 5G is a kind of mobile broadband technology that I won't quote any specifics, but it allows your mobile device to push a lot more data and do a lot more what we'll call multimedia experiences, both ways. So both receiving and sending. So you could stream. I'm assuming you could probably stream like 4K videos with that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming it's something massive like that, and that was the whole point. It's always been this push for better connectivity. Now, what was interesting was that a lot of people got super paranoid in 2020 that somehow 5G was like spreading the Rona.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, how did that get going?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, one thing is that it's coming from China. 5G technology is coming from China. To my understanding, at least here in Europe, pretty much, I think Huawei, the Chinese company that has received a lot of flack for being, in cahoots with the Chinese government. I don't really want to get into that too much. Because I don't know the details, and my geopolitics in terms of China-Europe relationship is not as good as it was when I was back in uni. I will say that to my understanding, the Chinese companies are actually contracted by European states to build 5G stations, right? So I think one of the, what sort of connects the coronavirus and the 5G is that both of these technologies, I'm not sure that Chinese invented 5G, but they definitely have good infrastructure or like the technology to build like that infrastructure in foreign countries. So I think that's one of the reasons that both things are coming out of China. And 5G is, I've looked into 5G, but not that much into it. I sort of do see the reasoning for people who believe that 5G could potentially cause cancer in kids. And remember, I'm not really sure if you're aware, but there is this town. Now, I can't really recollect it completely in my head. There is this town in America that, or was it Australia? I can't remember, but I'm sure if people look into it, they could find it. Maybe even you have heard about this township or whatnot. They pretty much recently had built, I believe, a 5G tower in the area, and apparently like 2 or 3 kids from like the same high school that only has like, it's a fairly small high school. 2 or 3 kids from that high school like got cancer that year. So I think that was a big point in the 5G conspiracies, that there's a town somewhere, they build a tower, now all of a sudden kids in that high school are getting cancer. I will say that I did some digging back in the day when I was like looking into that story. It seems that the experts are denying any sort of link between the actual 5G tower that was recently built, and they don't attribute it at all to the cancer in kids. It was just like, it was just all, I assume, circumstantial, and it was all, just, it just sort of was, it just happened that way. All of a sudden, a few kids got cancer. I mean, it's odd, but I think these are the main reasons why the 5G is sort of portrayed as being some. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm not an expert, so I don't wanna.
I mean, I going back and forth on this. I mean, on one hand, it's like, obviously, me, like I'm pretty pro science and pro data, and I don't like to push a lot of theories that maybe just seem anti-scientific. I will say that when I was at UCLA, and first got into, one of my hobbies is radio scanning, so monitoring radio traffic of like police and fire and aircraft and things like that. One of my friends there was an assistant professor of physics at the time at UCLA, and this is like the early days, pretty early days, right? Like late 90s. of mobile phones, and he said someone who was like way deep into amateur radio, so very much used to like very high powered radio frequencies, both for work and for academics and for his own, sending signals across the earth.
Yeah.
He said that having a microwave transmitter, which is what a mobile phone is, it's literally microwave frequencies. Having a microwave transmitter that was as powerful as a watt next to his head or other sensitive parts of his body made him very nervous. He said there was some issues. Now I will say also, case in point, Sheryl Crow, who was known to be a kind of an early adopter of using mobile phones, and how he's having, back in the day, in the mid 90s, and being on tour a lot, she was using a mobile phone a lot. She ended up with not a cancerous tumor, but a benign tumor on the side of her head that had the phone next to it all the time. Now, the other thing that makes me nervous is, besides, those anecdotal things I've told you, is that from what I've read and kind of looked at about this topic, it does feel like there's some level of danger that they don't fully understand. So on paper, there shouldn't be a problem. Whenever this topic comes up, they say, listen, the frequency is being used and the level of power and this and that. We've studied it and ran all these tests. But then when you dig a little, like, oh, it's fine, nothing happens. But then when you dig a little, it can't physically do it. It's impossible. It can't, it doesn't violate, that would violate the laws of physics as we know it. But then you dig, well, we don't really know all the, we don't know everything yet. Yeah. And there still is some evidence that there's some kind of mechanism that we don't fully understand, something less direct that does have the possibility of causing problems. I mean, I'll say, just case in point, one of the weapons that China was using against India in their recent border dispute, this is also a weapon that we developed way back during the Gulf War for crowd control, is a microwave transmitter where you aim it at people and it makes them feel sick and, kind of starts cooking them alive a little bit.
Dude, the Havana syndrome.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's you. And I know you have a show about that on your channel. Case in point, yeah, when you this has been going on for a long time with any kind of radiation. This is really radiation at the end of the day. Just depends on what kind of radiation it is. Some radiation is more harmful than others at different powers, especially. It's a form of radiation. Aim a form of radiation at something, like you jump in front of one of those big microwave transmitters, you're not going to have a good day. Now the question is whether, when it's more diffused and it's like in your pocket next to your genitals, and your reproductive organs or other parts of your body, or receiving signals, or whether it's a tower next to your house or your school. And, to be fair to those towns that had the kids with caught cancer, there's a lot of crap in the ground too. There's a lot of stuff that gets into drinking water. There's a lot of other environmental things. For sure, 5G is not the only thing that may or may not be able to hurt us. I guess to kind of polish off this topic, I will say, from my point of view, I will say that I'm not at all confident that whether Wi-Fi or anything else in our environment that's owned by a big, rich company with deep pockets and lots of politicians working for them on the lobbyist side, on the lobbying side, when something becomes too big to fail, let's say it is causing cancer for X number of people, and just anecdotally, just like theoretically, let's say 5G was giving 0.01% of the population cancer. Are they going to let that become public? And is that going to stop them? Will people stop using cell phones? You know what I mean? Will some people throw away their mobile phones because, it's causing cancer in 1% of the population every year, all in aggregate between Wi-Fi and everything else?
I'll take the chances, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then maybe it's like one of those things where they just don't want us to know. So exactly. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to come off too crazy, but I think our point about bringing that up was that was a thought that maybe, even though he didn't say anything about it, he certainly talked about everything else. Maybe that's why he did what he did, because what he did massive disruption. Like you said, what was the harm done? Well, the harm done was massive disruption of telecommunications for businesses and residents and agencies in the area. I mean, it was like he blew up a, like a freeway overpass, in like a crowded city, but without that kind of personal damage, I guess.
Exactly. One of the commenters on one of my Instagram posts actually, because I posted like right after this bombing happened, like I made a little post about this whole situation, and someone from Nashville actually posted to me that the internet was out for the whole weekend or something like that. So the internet was out for like multiple days, and now when I'm thinking about it, yo, this guy, like, this makes sense, so just to put it in, just to round it up, he, like, I have this information that if I could just quickly find it, just give me like 5 seconds, right? So basically, this is what Daryl DeBusk, a spokesperson for the FBI of Tennessee field office, said, "We are aware the suspect sent materials which espoused his viewpoints to several acquaintances throughout the country," because they found that on his, I believe, I think they found that on his hard drive on his computer and things like that. So he basically, that's how they know this information. And what we think, as I'm thinking, this could have been the case. He was really into he somehow merged like some conspiracy theories in his head, like the reptilian conspiracy, I think he merged like the reptilian conspiracy with the 5G conspiracy and the press organization conspiracy. And in this sense, like, he was, I mean, in his head, he was probably giving the city of Nashville a Christmas present, protecting them against like the evil AT&T, company, because he did explode the building right next to the AT&T. One other interesting detail I want to mention before we have to mention this. Now, Anthony's mother was actually spilling the beans to police, because just as you mentioned, like, their relationship was like touchy. He was like trying to swindle her out of like some real estate or something like that, right? So she was spilling the beans. She was telling on him to the cops, and what she told that his father, which would be the mother's husband, used to work for AT&T. And actually, FBI also said that, and just the general feel from the press releases that we're having, from what the FBI is saying, I think the general feel right now is that Anthony Werner was really the main reason for his explosion seems to have been at least linked with AT&T, with the 5G technology, and to some degree to the alien conspiracy stuff and stuff like that. So I don't know, dude. That's definitely interesting. One other thing to mention here is that we didn't mention. I wanted to talk a little bit about it. In Tennessee, you apparently can transfer the ownership of land and property without, the person who is receiving the property signature, or without the person even being aware of that. So, the Daily Mail actually reported late on Saturday that a house worth $249,000 was actually transferred. This house was owned by, or at least in the possession of Anthony Werner. This house was actually transferred to a 29-year-old Michelle Swing in January of 2019 by Warner. And then another $160,000 worth home was transferred to the same woman last month, before the explosion happened. Now, this happened with some sort of like, because in Tennessee, in the state of Tennessee, you can deed property to someone else without their consent or their signature or anything. This woman quoted, her like ownership, and she also said, I didn't even buy the house. He just deed it over to me without my knowledge. So this is all very weird to me. That's about all I can say, but I will say that Anthony Werner actually knew this lady's, Michelle Swing, who received the homes. She knew this lady's mother, for somehow, who was living, I think she's like from California or something like that. She's like a entertainment executive from California. So at first I was like, did he just like pick a random person from like a phone book and like I'll transfer the deed to this person? Because apparently in Tennessee, like if someone in Tennessee is willing to like deed their property to me, like I'd take it, because apparently it's that easy. So apparently I was like, did he just like deed this to like some random woman in California? But actually he knew the mother or something like that of that woman. So it does seem that Anthony Werner was an interesting character, and that he didn't probably have many friends in his surrounding area. He had a lot of acquaintances all over the country, but he didn't have that many acquaintances in his general living proximity. And I can relate to that a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I think I know a lot more people outside of my country than inside of it. So yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, I guess sometimes I'm like, well, I guess I'm not that far different than that either. Where, I definitely am not that close necessarily to my neighbors, and yeah, it's kind of, I would, for a lot of these things, as being someone who's a little bit socially weird myself, and definitely not the life of the party necessarily, or who has kind of a, I'm sure anybody that listens to me will notice peculiarities of how I communicate and go on these rants and have very strong beliefs about things, and get on my soapbox a little bit, maybe more so than people that like are just happy to sit back and watch watch TikTok all day, or watch some TV series that I would think is a little bit vapid, and that's they're happy with their lives like that. That's not me. So sometimes when I see someone like this, I'm like, this is someone else who's also not like that, but maybe this is like when it goes wrong, or like the downside of not being connected enough to your fellow human beings, or being at odds with, I don't know, reality or conventional beliefs. Now, I guess we're almost getting to the point where we're going to wrap this up, but the one thing I will say, we'll probably, as much as I don't want to harp on it too much, I will mention that, look, like at some point, someone did actually call the cops on this guy. So he had what was, it's, the facts are still a little shaky, because right now the cops and the lawyers and everybody are kind of playing like he said, she said, he said, with pointing the finger at who didn't follow up what lead. But at some point, he had a girlfriend, also in her 60s, who I guess was in the process of getting worried about him, and maybe they were breaking up. But you never know, like when someone's breaking up, how much of what they report is a valid concern versus trying to get even with somebody that they're not in love with anymore. Either way. But what happened was the cops get called, and I think her lawyer called the cops, and they get there, and she's sort of sitting outside their house, and she's got 2 unloaded guns next to her, and she says they're Anthony's guns, and she doesn't want them in the house around her anymore. She's worried. The criticism is that she was the one that was actually brought in for mental observation, but in fairness, I think there were some aspects of the way that contact was made with the cops and some of the things that were communicated. It doesn't mean that she wasn't also maybe experiencing like a mental situation, maybe because of him, maybe living with him, right? So for whatever reason, she was brought in for mental observation. Now there's sort of she supposedly at some point, either she or the lawyer or both of them conveyed that he was building like big bombs in his RV. And there's a lot of shakiness on the paper trail about what accusation was made and how much follow-up there was. Because from what I can tell, it sounds like the cops were like, they kind of did some precursory knock on the door, he wouldn't answer. And, they claimed that they asked his lawyer for permission, and his lawyer said no, but then his lawyer's like, well, no, that couldn't have happened because I wasn't representing him then anyway, and I wouldn't have told him that. So there's like kind of 2 different stories going on. Whatever the real story is, there's a sense by some people that like, had he been, I don't know, different demographic, a different gender, a different religion, different set of beliefs, that maybe the cops, federal authorities, etc., would have taken this threat more seriously. And it turned out it was a real threat, right? I mean, for sure something blew up, only by the grace of his actions and, whatever deity you believe in. Did no one else get killed, though some other people were injured. So it wasn't like people got off scot-free. There were injuries from this. It was a mass explosion.
It's a Christmas miracle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for real, right? I mean, thank goodness. Seriously, I mean, you like you said, it's kind of weird to look at it this way, but gosh, if there was going to be something like this that happened on a major holiday of any religion, I mean, I think that was like the silver lining that we weren't mourning the death of anybody except for maybe this guy that did the action. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I feel like there's still a lot coming out about that. So
Yeah.
I'm sure by the day the story changes. And interestingly, here in the United States, it seems like they've already forgotten about this case because of other stuff going on in politics, and we're about to change presidential administrations, and we had a whole other bunch of excitement. Yeah, we won't go into, but enough said about that. But I guess I know you and I, this time we had left, I think we had some semi funny stuff to talk about with kind of our reactions to this. Like I know you had. I feel like there'll be a little bit of a cultural thing between how like RVs specifically are
Oh,
viewed. Like,
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
what your perception is. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really even have that strong of an opinion. I just always thought that RVs are, a little bit retarded. I would have to say, and I always feel like everyone who owns them, usually like I would personally cast a little bit of suspicion to those people, because it doesn't really make sense. I have down that RVs are just like a shoebox apartment. It's all clunky and a million things could break pretty much. And I also don't really think that there was a kid in the history of humans who enjoyed a family trip across the strait in the family RV. Like, I personally, to me, that would be hell. Like driving in a slow clunky shoebox like apartment. I don't know, dude. Like, for me personally, like an RV trip, like for like 6 hours with a family in the RV. I don't know, dude. I think I would go insane. So it just, I mean, I don't know, dude. What are your opinions on RVs?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I said, maybe this is particular a little bit to the geography of the United States, because you're right. Like in a lot of other countries, they're just not that big. I mean, you know what I mean? And if they
Yeah.
are, then maybe there's like bad terrain and stuff like that. I'll say I personally did actually have a lot of family vacations where, I was in the family minivan or station wagon, and we literally drove from like Los Angeles to Yellowstone, which is, about halfway across the US.
What?
A lot of wide open spaces and stuff. I mean, I'll say the cool thing was, I think I would have liked an RV. Like for one of those vacations, I actually got to sit in the back of a station wagon, so facing backwards, and had like the whole trunk to myself. And that was actually pretty awesome. Like that was, I guess, given like what the 80s were. But I think like if I could have been in like an RV where I could have like walked around and like, like done stuff at like a desk or laid on a bed or gone to the bathroom, or I don't know. Like I will say around me, and I live in kind of like, middle class housing
Yeah.
in Los Angeles, plenty of the higher income people around me have what I'll call nice RVs. Nice RVs. I mean, I definitely see even around me. Sometimes I'll see some like really high end RVs that are like luxury buses. I mean, but just it's like a bus, but the whole inside has been turned into an RV. I've also been at like the beach where I was like, oh man, I wish I had an RV because I want to take a shower right now and like change my clothes, and instead I got to like drive 40 miles back to my house and
Mm.
sit here in my wet clothes, or what, you know what I mean, like that, or like, hey, if I had an RV, like I could hang out at the beach like for another day and not have to go back and forth. So I will say, like, I think some of it is Americans, because especially some parts of the U.S. are super spread out, so it's not that unusual. Case in point is that Delphi case where you had people driving hours in either direction just to go to the park or something. um, Maybe Americans have a little bit of higher tolerance for that. I will say, from like a social media and YouTube and cultural perspective, I see a lot more people. Like there's a couple of YouTubers I follow, like Nomadic Fanatic. There's people that are like into like either full out RV life. Even Tom Green, who's like a famous comedian here, he's totally gone all in on like the RV life with like a drone and all this stuff that like the high end social media people do. But there's even people that do like a smaller version of that, like to your point, where it's like, it seems like it would suck, but if you are into like driving to like remote areas like the desert, they'll do what's called like van life. So van life is like the budget version of an RV, where you take like a big commercial van and you put like beds and maybe a little toilet somewhere in the corner and like a kitchen and stuff.
Yeah.
And like these people will just tour the US. Like, I don't know. It's weird. It's like, I think because of the internet, people can actually like do their jobs while on the move. Now, I'll tell you, my final fantasy for that is that I think when cars can finally like drive themselves like affordably, where like all cars have to drive themselves, to me that would be awesome, because you could like, if the car's driving itself, you're not having to spend your mental energy on it. You can like say, hey, I'm going to go to sleep now. The car's going to drive itself all night to like Yosemite. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to like clock in at work from Yosemite and then like go hit the trails, or like go skiing up in like, you know, Big Bear or Mammoth Lakes or something, like at the end of my workday. You know what I mean? But like, I didn't have to drive myself. The van drove itself. I've still got internet. I've got 5G because Anthony Warner didn't blow it up. And yeah, like that. So I don't know. That's, I think, but it is like you said, I think, but on the other hand, in my neighborhood, one of the things we hate is when some, sad to say, low income or homeless person in a really run down, like doors falling off of it, literally, RV comes to camp on our block, and all these problems start happening. Like, we've had, like, no joke, like domestic issues where they're like beating the crap out of each other in their van, you know, in their camper, and like the police have to get called. We've had them like start stealing stuff around the neighborhood. We've had them like start using our hoses and our water and stuff like that. Like, not me specifically, but like my neighbors, like literally wake up in the middle of the night and this dude's like got like their hose from their front lawn and using it. You know, got them leaving trash, got drug issues. Like, there is that downside. Like, that's the trashy side. Like, there's that Breaking Bad side of it. Like in that show Breaking Bad, they used a rundown RV like what this guy had. So maybe that's like the warning sign when it's an RV that looks like it's from 1983 and the paint's peeling off. Yeah, that's when it's like, yeah, you don't want that thing around you. So like, I definitely see what you're saying with that one. That's like, that's creepo alert. But like my neighbor who's making six figures down the street, when he gets an RV, like, I don't even see that thing. That thing's parked in his backyard or like, you know, in an alley. He washes that thing. Like, he's taking that thing up the coast, but like, he still has a house. You know what I mean? He's not living out of that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. So yeah, pretty much. Personally, I don't think I have any more to say besides, one thing. This episode definitely was more of a freestyle episode. I would like to call it that way. So definitely, guys who are listening to this episode, tell us what you like about this, because I think we personally enjoyed this week the freedom to not, to have a more casual episode. Next, also one thing to mention before we sign off, we also have planned for the next week an actual mystery for you guys. So I know for the last few weeks we haven't really talked about a mystery. And, hence, this is the Solvable Mysteries podcast. We do have a real mystery next week for you guys, so we're excited to talk about that. It's I think you and me are especially interested in that case. Like, I'm really interested, so that's gonna be fun to research. But I will say today we had like a more freestyle episode where we just casually talked about things. Guys, just let us know what you think in the comments. Do you like us talking just more like freely, less structured? I think we enjoyed ourselves probably a little bit more this week than, for say, when we were doing those super in-depth, like detailed things. So I don't know, man. We'll probably return to those on some cases, but I'm just gonna mention that I really enjoyed it. So yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments section. What do you think about this format? And Glenn, you got anything to mention to our audience before we sign off?
Hey, thanks again for all the great support every day. We get so many great comments, so much good feedback, and I do want you to know that when you write us a comment and you ask if we can cover a specific topic, we see it. We see every single one of your comments, and when you put it there, just to let you know, it is the right place. You can also, of course, get us on social media like Facebook, Twitter. on Instagram. But yeah, if you on YouTube, if you leave a comment and ask, hey, can you please cover X topic, we're going to put it on the list. So, thank you once again.
Exactly, guys. This was episode number 79, the Nashville bombings. Catch us next week on episode 80. We're going to be talking about a really cool mystery. And for now, just, as always, chill out and peace out.